Despite initial reports that NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez's collapse on NXT television a couple of weeks ago was all part of a storyline and an angle, new reports have suggested that there are legitimate concerns for the health of the former NXT Women's Champion, leading to some suggesting there could be an undisclosed issue that is currently trying to be diagnosed right now. We've got details on that. The Vince McMahon biopic has reportedly been cancelled, according to the directors of the film. Brock Lesnar's recent match against Bobby Lashley at Elimination Chamber saw a finish change because of Stone Cold Steve Austin's WrestleMania 39 status. The Great Muta has been announced for the 2023 class of the WWE Hall of Fame. Butch is set to return to his old WWE gimmick later this year. John Cena discusses the WWE retirement rumors making the rounds. Dragon Lee is banking on a main roster call-up in WWE later this year. Plus, we have the latest ratings for this week's episode of NXT on USA Network. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of world wrestling entertainment. And let's start off talking about Roxanne Perez. The story that seemed relatively straightforward and completely like a storyline and a work has taken an interesting turn, with some suggestions that there are reportedly legitimate concerns within WWE over the current status of NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez. Now, of course, on the March 7 episode of NXT, the show went off the air with Perez collapsing after her match with Meiko Satomura and being taken away in an ambulance. Now, the collapse and the ambulance angle was just a storyline, but it now sounds like there might be a legitimate reason for Perez being written off the show, and that was the cover for it. And again, this is quite an interesting story, but there is quite a lot of conflicting information on this. So a week later, on March 14, it was announced that there will be a ladder match for the NXT Women's Championship at Stand and Deliver on April 1st, but it's unknown whether Perez will be in that match or not. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio today, Dave Meltzer said, quote, "The reason it's so vague is because the actual situation really is so vague. They actually don't know exactly what is going on. So until they do, they kind of have to go in there with, well, we don't know if she's stripped of the title, just a whole bunch of things going on. What I was told was it's a vague situation in the sense that hopefully there's nothing wrong, but there might be. She didn't faint after the match. That was a cover story for the fact that something may or may not be going on, and they don't know exactly. So therefore, they did the Shawn Michaels angle. I don't know what it is. I was just told that it's a cover story for something, and they don't know exactly what it is. Therefore, it's a vague story because the actual situation is vague." Now, that's quite interesting, and I suppose it does make somewhat of some sense. There had quite clearly been a build towards Perez defending the title in a singles match against Tiffany Stratton at Stand and Deliver as late as a week prior to the collapse angle. So that shows that plans have changed very recently, but some people are suggesting, no, Dave Meltzer's just being worked, he's just being a mark. No, that's not what's happening. Dave Meltzer's just buying in to WWE, trying to convince him that a storyline is real. He's being worked by WWE. And certainly, that is something that is being said by other outlets when it comes to this all being a storyline. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select was a lot more direct, reporting that Roxanne Perez is fine and her injury is and always has been for storyline purposes. Now, it should be noted that WWE has not shied away from discussions or replays of the incident on NXT programming, which would suggest that it is kayfabe in perhaps continuing with said storyline. WWE Senior Vice President of Talent Development Creative Shawn Michaels announced this week that with Perez's health in question, NXT needed to take steps to potentially crown a new women's champion at Stand and Deliver, beginning with the series of qualifying matches this past Tuesday. Quote, "With Stand and Deliver in less than 3 weeks, I have an obligation to announce we possibly have to crown a new NXT Women's Champion," he tweeted. Of course, Zoe Stark and GD Dolan both qualified for the ladder match at Stand and Deliver at the Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, California. Perez, meanwhile, has held her title since defeating Mandy Rose on the December 13 episode of NXT. So you've got Dave Meltzer saying, no, it's actually a cover for something else, but they don't know what that else is. It's all very vague. You've got Shawn on Ross Sapp saying, no, it's all part of a storyline, it's all part of something bigger and wider. But at the same time, they were clearly building to Roxanne Perez versus Tiffany Stratton. So I guess this will lead to more discussion on it. I guess we'll probably hear more details about this vague situation in the coming days. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is this WWE working Dave Meltzer, or was it actually a cover for a legitimate injury or undisclosed medical issue? Now, let's switch gears and talk about Vince McMahon, of course, the topic of many pro wrestling fans recently. While Vince McMahon's 2022 alone could have probably been made into a full-length motion picture, a biopic based on the former WWE CEO has actually been in the works since 2017. The movie, titled Pandemonium, was even once earmarked to have Bradley Cooper play McMahon himself. However, in recent years, any updates on the movie's production have been few and far between. That is until now, as a recent interview film conducted with the project's directors John Requa and Glenn Ficarra have now shed light on the future of Pandemonium. Unfortunately, however, it's not good news. When asked about the film's status, Ficarra answered, quote, Pandemonium is dead, sadly. Requa then elaborated on this, pointing the blame at Vince McMahon for Pandemonium's demise, saying, quote, Vince killed it. A predominant hurdle in the film's production was supposedly the required involvement and approval from WWE Studios, and ultimately the approval of Vince himself. Ultimately, Requa couldn't hide his disappointment with the film's cancellation and pointed the blame firmly at McMahon, saying, quote, so yeah, we are on a very long list of people who got effed over by Vince. Now, despite Pandemonium's cancellation, a planned Vince McMahon Netflix series is reportedly still in the works for release as of an update from The Ringer's Bill Simmons in January of this year. Again, it's going to get released in January this year. It's already passed. It's still in production, essentially. It's still ongoing, and it is still eventually going to get released. Now, Vince McMahon did rear his head for the first time at a WWE event last Monday night on Raw, not this past week, the week prior, and some more news has emerged regarding Vince McMahon being backstage at Raw on March 6th and what exactly he was doing. The prevailing story is that he was backstage to visit John Cena. He was making his own WWE return in Boston, but there's also a consensus that there might have been more to it than that, since it was the first time McMahon has been seen backstage or even been backstage at a WWE show since July 2022. A new report from Sports Illustrated has provided a couple of stories from behind the scenes. SI's Justin Barrasso wrote that he spoke with multiple people who were backstage who said McMahon purposely stayed out of the way. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer had reported that McMahon was in gorilla position all night, which is something that SI sources have backed up too. McMahon reportedly sat front and center in the middle of Paul Levesque, that being Triple H, and Bruce Pritchard. Despite this, it was said that he was not wearing a headset and actually just spent most of the night on his cell phone. When wrestlers came to Gorilla for advice from management, specifically Levesque, it was said that McMahon hardly even raised his head and never offered any insight. From what Levesque told WWE Talent in meetings back in January, when McMahon returned to WWE as executive chairman, Levesque may talk with McMahon about creative and therefore listen to his ideas, but officially, Levesque is the one that makes the final calls. The SI report did also confirm that Vince McMahon was not backstage at this past Monday's March 13 episode of Monday Night Raw in Providence, Rhode Island. In case you're wondering, there was no further news provided on McMahon's alleged, quote, creepy mustache or his dyed hair or anything like that, but they're just backing up, I guess, other reports out there that he was in gorilla position all night and largely kept his head down. Now, at one point, it was rumored and certainly pitched to Stone Cold Steve Austin that he could face Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 39. Well, the curious case of Brock Lesnar has certainly been an interesting story on this current road to WrestleMania. Of course, Lesnar is set to face off with the Nigerian giant Amos on the grandest stage of them all, but there have been multiple scheduled opponents for Lesnar on the show. One of the names, of course, one of the early names was Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was pitched a match with both Lesnar and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania this year. The feud with Lashley and Lesnar ended rather abruptly at Elimination Chamber when Brock Lesnar got disqualified while trapped in the Hurt Lock. And per Sports Illustrated, the finish was changed to protect both men, as Lesnar was set to prepare for a match against Steve Austin. The article said, quote, initially Lesnar was slated to fight Bobby Lashley at the event, Sports Illustrated learned, but that was moved to February in a finish that protected both men at Elimination Chamber, so Lesnar could then prepare for a program against Steve Austin. Yet WWE and Austin never came to terms. Whether that happens with Austin and a different opponent is yet to be determined. Now, Bobby Lashley's WrestleMania status is also now up in the air due to speculation about whether or not his planned opponent Bray Wyatt, who had at one point been planned to face Lesnar, who reportedly rejected the idea, will even be cleared to compete on the show. So quite interesting that really as of February, that late change to the finish was because they were still hopeful that Brock Lesnar would face Stone Cold Steve Austin. So as of Elimination Chamber that night, they thought that Lesnar could indeed face Stone Cold at WrestleMania, which would fly in the face of other reports because Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select had reported that the Lesnar versus Austin pitch was made in the summer last year, and it didn't really go anywhere because money and creative was really far off what Steve Austin wanted to do. But maybe it was back on the table as of last month. As we know right now, it's not happening unless they announce it for next year's WrestleMania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, regarding Brock Lesnar as well, since we're talking about him, a backstage update has emerged following reports that Brock Lesnar left the March 10 episode of Monday Night Raw early. Lesnar made an appearance early on during Monday's episode, meeting Omos in the ring for a face-to-face segment ahead of their match at WrestleMania 39. Following the show, PW Insider reported a note that Lesnar had left the taping quickly after his segment, heading to the airport in a car and flying back home on his private jet. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select confirmed that indeed that was the case, but noted that this is very common and the reaction to the original report was blown out of proportion ahead of Lesnar's upcoming WrestleMania match against Omos. There have been rumors circulating that Lesnar is finishing up with WWE, but I agree this was really blown out of proportion because not only is this common for Brock Lesnar, this is common for pro wrestlers. They always say sometimes being in the main event is one of the loneliest spots in the locker room because by the time you've come back through the curtain after the main event, not a lot of people are there. A lot of the talent has left because they've got to get to the next town, they've got to get to their hotel room, they've got to travel, they've got to see their family, they want to get home. So it's not uncommon for people to leave the arena before the broadcast is even done. So it's really not that big of a deal that people were trying to make it out to be. Now, the next member of the class of 2023 WWE Hall of Fame has been confirmed. It was confirmed by Ric Flair yesterday on The Bump and confirmed by other news outlets. It's now been confirmed that Japanese wrestling legend The Great Muta will be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. As confirmed by Mark Raimondi of ESPN and Ric Flair, Keiji Muto will be a part of the class of 2023 as The Great Muta. PW Insider previously reported that there were plans for WWE to induct the wrestling veteran at this year's ceremony. Now, it's quite interesting because although the Great Muta has never wrestled for WWE, he did participate in the New Japan Pro Wrestling and WWF Champion Series in Japan back in 1985 and often competed for NWA and WCW in the late 80s and into the 90s as well. Muta was a former WCW Tag Team Champion. He also had a legendary rivalry with Sting over the NWA World Television Championship. On January 1st, 2023, the Great Muta had his last singles match against WWE superstar Shinsuke Nakamura. It's also alleged this is where the Hall of Fame deal came together because WWE lent them Nakamura in return for Muta coming over to do the Hall of Fame. His last official match under the persona of the Great Muta took place later on that same month when he teamed with AEW Sting and Darby Allin against Akira, Hakushi, and Namochi Marufuji. Keiji Muto's in-ring career came to an end at the Keiji Muto Grand Final event on February 21 with a pair of Tokyo Dome matches against New Japan Pro Wrestling's Tetsuya Naito and Muto's legendary rival Masahiro Chono. So obviously Muto going to be in the Hall of Fame this year. Now, when it comes to Batista, what's going on with Batista? Well, as we're getting closer to WrestleMania, more inductees into the Hall of Fame are being officially announced. Of course, as revealed on last week's SmackDown, before being interrupted by the Judgment Day, of course, Rey Mysterio will headline the class of 2023. The Nature Boy Ric Flair shared that recently retired Japanese icon, the Great Muta, would be the next recipient of this honor. And according to PW Insider, there are 3 more names to be officially unveiled, including rumoured inductee Stacy Keibler. However, no tag teams will apparently be inducted this year. But when it comes to multi-time world champion and movie star Dave Bautista, who was meant to be inducted already but wasn't due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it doesn't look like he will be inducted in that remaining number. Unfortunately, this year's ceremony won't fit into Bautista's schedule. According to the report, the actor, known for his roles in June, Glass Onion, and the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, will still be in South Africa filming his latest project, My Spy, during WrestleMania week. Originally, Bautista was supposed to be part of the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2020 alongside the British Bulldog, the Bella Twins, John Bradshaw Layfield, Jushin Thunder Liger, and the NWO. Due to the cancellation of the ceremony that year, the crop of legends was inducted with the class of 2021 the following year, but the Animal was not among them to receive the honour due to his busy schedule. Presumably, WWE wants to wait until he can be inducted in person, although with his stock rising in Hollywood lately, who knows when his schedule will allow for Bautista to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So he's not going to get the honour this year, and he's in a strange situation now whereby everyone knows he's going in the Hall of Fame, but they just don't know when it's going to happen. Now, could we see Butch return to the Pete Dunne Bruiserweight gimmick later this year? According to one report, we won't have to wait too long. Since Triple H took over the head of creative back in July of last year, many WWE superstars have found themselves undergoing name changes. This includes the likes of Max Dupree returning to LA Knight, Doudrop returning to Piper Niven, Nikki ASH returning to Nikki Cross. One main roster star who many expected Triple H to repackage is Butch, the former Pete Dunne, who is a member of the Brawling Brute stable on SmackDown with Sheamus and Ridge Holland. Well, per WrestleVote, speaking to Give Me Sport, Triple H changing Butch back into Pete Dunne is something that's in the works and is expected to be done before the end of the year. They said, quote, "Absolutely, I was told that it's in the works. When Hunter came back, I was told that Pete Dunne was due to become Pete Dunne. But somebody said to wait because the Brawling Brutes were catching on. When Pete Dunne returns, it won't be as a member of the Brawling Brutes. I'm sure he'll be back by the end of the year." So suggested we could see maybe the Brawling Brutes split up by the end of the year if that report is to be believed. Now, what about these retirement rumours when it comes to John Cena? Well, John Cena himself has actually commented on these. Obviously, with Cena facing Austin Theory at WrestleMania 39 for the United States Championship, some have suggested it could be one of Cena's last matches in a WWE ring. Now, John Cena has provided some clarification on his recent comments, which fueled speculation that he could be retiring soon. Cena made his WWE return on the March 13 edition of Raw to accept Austin Theory's WrestleMania 39 challenge. The 16-time world champion was visibly very emotional during his entrance. After the event, Cena explained his reaction, tweeting, quote, "Last night was the first time I entered the arena, and I had the thought it might be the last time. I'll never be able to put into words how much I love the WWE Universe." Now, speaking with AP News, Cena clarified what he meant when it came to his March 13 appearance, where he first realized that he was coming towards the end of his wrestling career. Explaining that he doesn't have any plans for an imminent retirement, Cena said, quote, "I tried to put it into words in Twitter. I guess I didn't explain myself correctly. It was the first time I came out into the arena knowing that this has a definitive end. Normally you come out, you get all excited. Okay, this is the next one. I'm waiting for the next one. I'm not done, of course. I made that statement accepting a match at WrestleMania, so I know I have at least one more in front of me. But what I was trying to convey was that the first time I looked at all that excitement and energy and realized this is the twilight of that journey." So he's not saying that he's retiring anytime soon, but he's realizing he's getting closer towards the end of his in-ring career, which is true, which again is, nobody can deny that, certainly, can they? Now, Dragon Lee, one of the big NXT signings this year, WWE's shock signing of Dragon Lee to its NXT brand in late 2022 was something of a throwback to the black and gold NXT, where indie talent were popping up left, right, and center. While NXT has recently shifted away from this approach, the signing of Lee was seen as a massive deal, namely considering he had somewhat close ties to WWE's opposition in AEW. With Lee's brother Roosh already competing in AEW and Lee himself appearing for the company previously in a trios match alongside Roosh and Andrade El Idolo against the Elite, Lee's move to WWE came as a surprise to some fans. While in AEW, around the same time as Lee's signing, AEW had scooped up their own major Mexican star in the form of Bandido. Bandido. And now Dave Meltzer on Wrestling Observer Radio has been discussing both Bandido and Lee's future in their respective companies, saying, quote, Dragon Lee and Bandido are basically starting at around the same time, and both are equally talented. They're both super talented guys. I think Bandido's got a little more charisma, but Dragon Lee's almost the same. It'll just be interesting over the next year who made the right choice. When discussing Lee in particular, Meltzer questioned Lee starting out in NXT rather than the main roster and how that will affect his success. Quote, because Dragon Lee's going to get a lot of TV time, but he's also banking on the idea of making it to the main roster in 1 year and making money. Because in NXT, not that he's going to starve, but it's not big money. And then Bandido, who's got a regular contract where he's making better money than Dragon Lee, I'm sure, but is he going to be used in a meaningful fashion over the next year? Certainly, that is going to be the big question, and I guess we'll have to find out in about 12 months' time. Finally, speaking of NXT, we have the ratings for this past Tuesday's episode on the USA Network. NXT has entered a minor post-roadblock slump as the road to Stand and Deliver continues. WrestleNomics is reporting that this week's episode of NXT was watched by 590,000 viewers, a 5% drop in viewership from last week's episode. However, the show suffered a 12% drop in viewers in the key 18 to 49 demographic, with only 196,000 from that age group tuning in to see Grayson Waller invade the home of his Stand and Deliver opponent Johnny Gargano. The show was also notable for featuring the first two qualifying matches for the ladder match for the NXT Women's Championship. Of course, we spoke earlier on about the status of NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez, which we still don't really know what's going on with her. Now, one major obstacle for NXT on Tuesday was the college basketball game that saw the Pittsburgh Panthers defeat the Mississippi State Bulldogs 60-59, which aired on True TV and led the 18 to 49 demographic, as well as Texas A&M 75-71 victory over Southeastern Missouri State. True TV is one of the homes of the early rounds of this year's NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Tournament 2. So maybe that played a part in it as well. But there you go, guys. It's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. Remember, you can join the WN365 roster page by clicking that join button, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.